The air in Lomé crackled with tension not from fireworks, but from fury. In backstreets and market squares, a whisper turned into a chant, "Step down." You cannot rule forever by force. Just hours earlier, President Faure Gnassingbé signed a decree, rewriting Togo's constitution to cling to power indefinitely. For a nation ruled by one family for over half a century, this was not just politics, it was gasoline on dry ground. And now, Togo burns. Is this the collapse of Africa's last enduring dynasty, the rebirth of a silenced people? Subscribe, share, and stay with us, because what happens next could change West Africa forever. The 24th of June, 2025. A day that will be etched into Togo's history not for what was celebrated, but for what was silently lost. At exactly 10:03 a.m., in a tightly guarded parliamentary hall, Faure Gnassingbé raised his right hand, not to be sworn in as president, but as President of the Council of Ministers, a newly invented title. No ballots, no campaigns, no mandate from the people. And yet, with this legal sleight of hand, he now holds unquestioned executive control over military, economic, and judicial powers. It was not a coup in the shadows. It was a coronation in daylight disguised by constitutional smoke. The Constitution, amended just weeks earlier, stripped the presidency of authority and transferred it quietly to this new role, a role created by Faure, for Faure. The people watched from behind barricades and broken hopes. In that moment, power did not leave office, it just changed its name. But can a title rewrite a nation's soul? It didn't happen with tanks, it happened with signatures. In the dead silence of the National Assembly, a loyalist parliament passed Decree 2025-147, a 43-page document buried in legal jargon, but designed for one purpose: to legalize control without consent. Overnight, the democratic constitution was rewritten to allow hereditary succession, indefinite executive tenure, and immunity from prosecution for those in power. No referendum, no opposition voice, just a quiet vote, sealed with applause. This wasn't governance, it was engineering, a structure of power reassembled under the illusion of legality. The republic, once fragile but alive, was now embalmed in law. Rule of law did not disappear, it was reverse-engineered into a tool of rule. This is what scholars call juridical authoritarianism, where courts and codes no longer protect the people, but protect power from the people. And as Togo slept, its freedom was signed away. But can legality ever justify injustice? The 26th of June, 2025. Lomé did not wake up, it roared. At 7:42 a.m., the first column of smoke rose near Boulevard de the 13th of January Veer. By 10 a.m., thousands filled the streets, waving handwritten banners, "You can't crown yourself king." Burning tires lined the avenues. Chants thundered through the city, "We are the Republic." This was not a planned protest. It was a volcanic surge, coordinated but unified. Students, mothers, retired soldiers, no party lines, just fury. The match had been struck 2 days earlier with the quiet inauguration. Now, the people answered. Sociologists call this the tipping point, when repression breeds resistance faster than fear can suppress it. When identity, dignity, and rage find one voice. Lomé became a textbook in civil unrest. Not because of any leader, but because the people had remembered their power. And yet, the government called it a minor disturbance. If a million voices on the street are minor, what will they call the next explosion? It sounded harmless. President of the Council of Ministers. No election, no campaign, no mandate, just a signature and silence. But beneath that sterile title lay the blueprint of modern autocracy. While the ceremonial president waved politely, Faure Gnassingbé held the reins controlling military appointments, national security, and economic policy with zero term limits. It wasn't just power, it was permanence, a shadow throne veiled in legality, insulated by a loyal parliament. Togo hadn't abolished democracy, it had mutated it. In a world where constitutions can be rewritten like speeches, how do we define leadership by the office or by the grip? It started with a phone camera shaky shot of students in Lomé chanting, "60 years of one name," and within hours the footage went viral. From bay to Kara, from dorm rooms to market stalls, the youth rose not with guns, but with memories, memories of a surname that ruled 3 generations. In universities, portraits of Faure were pulled down. In strongholds, once silent, fists rose in defiance. What was once frustration had become fuel. This wasn't about politics, it was about breath, space, identity. But when the streets shout louder than the parties, who, then, is truly leading the revolution? There were no party colors, no press conferences, no charismatic leader with a megaphone. What erupted across Lomé on the 26th of June was pure, unfiltered rager generation, raised under one name, finally finding its voice. Teenagers skipped exams to march. Market women locked their stalls to join. Graffiti replaced slogans, "We lead ourselves." It was not a movement with a head, it was a heartbeat pulsing through the streets. No chance for elections, just cries to be seen. When fury finds no leader, no script, can it still change the course of history? Or will it be silenced before it speaks again? What began on the boulevards of Lomé did not stay there. By nightfall, Sokode's youth lit bonfires at roundabouts. In Sevagan, mothers banged pots in rhythm with distant chants. Farmers in Kara blocked roads not with words, but with wheelbarrows and defiance. The message was simple. This is no longer a capital crisis. This is national. For the first time in decades, protest wasn't urban, it was everywhere. No region untouched, no village too remote to echo the call. When the whole country rises as one, can even the oldest dynasty stand without trembling? In times of national upheaval, silence can scream louder than sirens. As the fires of protest spread, the presidential palace in Lomé remained mute. No speech, no press conference, no explanation. Only the steady clatter of tank treads rolling down Boulevard de la République. This wasn't diplomacy. It was deterrence, a strategy as old as authoritarianism itself. Replace words with weapons. Civic trust, already brittle, now cracked wide open. In political theory, such silence is not neutrality, it's a signal that the people's voice no longer matters. But when tanks become the only reply, what does that say about the future of rule? While tanks guarded intersections and state television played music, a different war was unfolding, one of messages, maps, and encrypted whispers. On Signal and Telegram, students exchanged real-time alerts, safe route diagrams, and police movement logs drawn by hand. The hashtag number #NotMyLeader surged across X and TikTok before being shadow banned. In just 36 hours, it had over 3 million mentions, many posted from dorms, cafes, even rooftops. This was resistance without megaphones, a movement without stages. Information became both shield and sword, outpacing the regime's censors at every turn. But in a world where data moves faster than bullets, who truly controls the battlefield? They filmed him under a flickering streetlight, face uncovered, voice shaking but clear. "He didn't win power," he said, staring into the camera. "He stole our future." The clip lasted just 14 seconds, but within hours, it spread across West Africa like wildfire, shared in classrooms, barbershops, and refugee buses heading north. This wasn't just a protest against a constitutional tweak. It was a generational rejection of a name, a dynasty, a silence passed down like inheritance. He was found dead the next morning. No press release, no arrest, just an absence, heavy as history. But when a whisper echoes louder than a gunshot, what else might still be heard? At exactly 4:17 a.m. on the 27th of June, the rumble of armored vehicles shattered Lomé's uneasy silence. Columns of military trucks rolled past schools, markets, mosques headed straight for Bé, a working-class district long known for its defiance. By sunrise, the entire neighborhood was under siege. No warnings, no warrants, just boots kicking indoors, and flashlights slicing through bedrooms. Residents report soldiers interrogating teenagers in courtyards, dragging men from their homes, and confiscating phones before anyone could record. It wasn't about restoring order, it was about preemptive fear. Human rights observers, barred from entry, rely on encrypted messages, over 200 detained in a single day, yet no official figures, no names, no accountability. In history books, these moments are often reduced to a single line: the government responded with force. But what do we call it when that force becomes the message itself? Across Togo, the transition was swift and chilling. By the 27th of June's dusk, what began as targeted crackdowns had morphed into full-scale militarization. In Karath, President's hometown schools shut without notice, markets emptied, buses sat frozen, checkpoints multiplied every kilometer, and civilians were questioned for simply walking. The government called it preventive stabilization, but on the ground, it looked more like a state of siege. Protest zones were cordoned off as if they carried infection. Curfews weren't declared, they were implied, enforced by rifles, not rules. From north to south, soldiers replaced civil servants. Armed presence became policy. In political science, we teach that a government's legitimacy rests on its ability to manage dissent, not erase it. So when a nation trades debate for deployment, what happens to democracy? At 4:17 a.m. on the 28th of June, 2025, the screens went black. No warning, no glitch, just silence. Across Togo, the internet vanished, mobile data, Wi-Fi, even basic SMS. It wasn't a technical failure, it was a calculated silence, a digital curfew without clocks. In classrooms, university projects vanished mid-upload. Hospitals lost access to cloud-based patient records. Small businesses, already struggling, found their payment systems frozen. But it wasn't just about function, it was about fear. Because when a regime pulls the plug on an entire nation's voice, it sends one message: you don't get to speak. Scholars call this tactic information suppression through infrastructure. But for those on the ground, it felt like the oxygen of modern life being sucked away. In a world built on connectivity, what happens when a government controls the switch? And who gets to turn it back on? By the evening of the 28th of June, whispers traveled faster than any signal. In Lomé's alleyways and Kara's empty markets, fear became the new language. Mothers warned children not to speak near windows. Rumors of foreign mercenaries and hidden detention camps spread like wildfire. The same neighborhoods that had chanted for freedom just nights before now sat in absolute silence. This is the anatomy of fear, not declared, but cultivated. Political scientists call it strategic demobilization, when the threat of force becomes more effective than force itself. And when fear takes root, even the bravest fall quiet. But how long can a people whisper before silence becomes unbearable? On the 29th of June, the crackdown slipped quietly into daily life. A street vendor in Bay was arrested not for shouting slogans, but for having a protest image on his phone. In Kara, a university lecturer reposted an international article and was invited to the station. He returned home, but friends say his voice has never returned the same. This wasn't about guns anymore, it was about the erasure of thought. In authoritarian theory, it's called repression by proximity, when punishment is selective, symbolic, and intimate enough to make the whole society police itself. Shops stayed open, but eyes avoided contact. Schools taught silence more than curriculum, and knowledge, it learned to hide. But how long can a nation survive when its brightest minds are forced into shadows? The regime's iron grip began to crack not from bullets, but from its own overreaction. When soldiers stormed a bookshop for selling pamphlets on Pan-African thought, or when an NGO was shut down for hosting a literacy class, the narrative shifted. This wasn't reform, it was legalized coercion, a land grab disguised as governance. Students coined it with bitter clarity. Asterisk, they're not fixing Togo, they're formatting it. Asterisk. Scholars who once stayed silent began whispering truth in lecture halls. A single phrase echoed in dormitories and courtyards. Asterisk. If this is peace, why does it need so many guns? Asterisk. In trying to silence dissent, the state accidentally amplified its true nature. But once truth slips through the crack scan, you ever patch the walls fast enough to hold it back? Then it happened, pixels pierced the blackout. Satellite images revealed military buildups near Lomé. Diaspora networks leaked videos of nighttime raids. And international journalists, once denied entry, began broadcasting from neighboring Ghana. The wall of silence cracked. From Kara to Sokode, whispers became chants. For the first time in decades, fear didn't silence it synchronized. When truth travels faster than propaganda, obedience evaporates. The regime didn't just lose control of the story, it lost control of the people's imagination. Even the most loyal began to ask, if they have to hide so much, what are they really building? And if the people no longer fear the regime, what does the regime have left? Why didn't it explode earlier? That question now echoes louder than the tear gas ever did. The truth is it already had. It just wasn't televised. For years, the uprising lived quietly in living rooms with no power, in market stalls trading silence for survival, in village paths walked by barefoot schoolchildren with no future in sight. Resentment fermented in the shadows of broken clinics, inside classrooms with 3 students sharing one book. The volcano wasn't dormant, it was ignored. Rebellion doesn't always begin with gunfire. Sometimes it starts with a sigh no one hears. But now that it has erupted, who dares pretend it wasn't there all along? The numbers looked impressive. Togo's GDP had been growing at a steady 5% per year. On paper, a miracle. In reality, an illusion. That growth never made it past the capital's polished conference rooms. In the streets, university graduates hawked SIM cards and rode motorbikes for pennies. waiters with engineering degrees, nurses moonlighting as vendors. A nation praised in economic reports, yet burdened by daily despair. The real economy lived in informal markets, in whispers about unpaid salaries, in families splitting one meal between 5. So when the regime spoke of progress, who exactly were they speaking to? History in Togo once moved in circle-style, unbreakable loops. Parents whispered about the iron rule of Gnassingbé Ayadema, about disappearances, about fear that lived in the walls. But this generation, born with smartphones, raised on memes and live streams, knows how to document, how to expose, how to connect beyond borders. They grew up not on party slogans, but on hashtags. This is not the Togo of 1975. The streets don't just remember, they record. Drones fly overhead. Videos go viral in minutes. Fear now fades faster than a buffering wheel. So when repression strikes, can the cycle still repeat? Has the loop finally broken? No leader, no manifesto, just pain shared like a common language. In Togo, the uprising didn't begin in a party office. It began in market stalls, hospital break rooms, dusty classrooms, and street corners where SIM cards are sold. A nurse earning $80 a month stood beside a mechanic with no pension. A schoolgirl marched next to her grandmother. When suffering cuts across class and creed, resistance becomes instinct, not ideology. This is what power fears most: a crowd with no center, no hierarchy to decapitate. The cry wasn't left or right, it was simply enough. And if no one is leading, who will they negotiate with next? You can survive in silence, but you cannot truly live. For decades, Togo's people weren't just ruled, they were muted. Under the weight of state control, creativity dried up. Journalists whispered, teachers self-censored, and even comedians knew when not to laugh. When children grow up seeing fear in their parents' eyes every time the radio crackles, they learn one thing: don't dream too loudly. Psychological control is the slowest violence. It doesn't bruise the body, but it strangles the future. So, when a nation forgets how to speak freely, what happens when it suddenly remembers? They still control the barracks, they still control the news, but what they've lost, the one thing no regime can afford to lose, is consent. The silent contract that once held the system together has been torn. Markets hum, but buyers scowl. Teachers show up, but teach with tired eyes. Even the anthem, once sung with pride, now echoes with a hollow ring. This isn't open rebellion, it's withdrawal. A million quiet refusals, day after day. Because without willing hearts, even the tightest fist holds nothing. So if power no longer flows from fear, where will it flow next? The tremor didn't stop at Togo's borders. From Benin to Côte d'Ivoire, even Cameroon governments are watching nervously, because the crowd in Lomé isn't just chanting for change. They're echoing a region's buried rage. Hashtags like *** Dynasty must fall and *** Africa eyes awake aren't mere slogans, they're digital drums, beating faster each hour. On campuses in Abidjan, murals of Thomas Sankara reappear. In Cotonou, young people whisper about their turn. This isn't just about one dynasty, it's about a generation rejecting inherited fear across West Africa. And if one spark lit the fire, how many others are ready to burn? The regime cut internet lines, shut down networks, blocked SIM cards by dawn, but the silence never arrived. From Berlin to Montreal, the Togolese diaspora took over the signal. They uploaded grainy footage smuggled through VPNs. They translated chants into 5 languages They tagged lawmakers, filed petitions, flooded embassies. Telegram groups became lifelines. In Paris, activists projected protest videos onto embassy walls. A blackout inside didn't stop the global megaphone outside. Togo was no longer alone, it was live. If they couldn't stop the message, how long could they keep pretending the world wasn't watching? France said nothing. No press conference, no envoy, not even a tweet. The nation that once drew Togo's borders with ink and rifles had gone silent, strategically silent. Young protesters in Lomé weren't surprised. They'd seen this pattern before. In textbooks, France brought civilization. But in practice, it now seemed to choose stability over freedom every time. Western media followed suit, brief headlines, then radio silence. No analyst dared call it what it was: a people rising against a dynasty France long supported. Was the West protecting values, or just its old investments in African dynasties? ECOWAS stood frozen caught in a moral trap of its own making. To condemn Faure Gnassingbé would mean admitting a brutal truth. Even an elected government can become the enemy of democracy. But to stay silent risked validating repression in broad daylight. For decades, ECOWAS championed constitutional order. Now, the Togo Uprising threatened to expose how order can suffocate justice. Behind closed doors, ministers whispered, balancing diplomatic loyalty with public outrage. If Togo falls, what precedent does it set for Niger, for Senegal, for themselves? When democracy becomes a mask, who dares to tear it off first? Leaders adapt but citizens evolve. From Dakar to Kinshasa, elites are taking notes. If Faure holds power through force cloaked in legality, others may follow. Yet, across the continent, something stirs beneath the surface quiet, determined, rising. Young people share tactics, translate speeches, decode laws once used to silence them. They are no longer just reacting, they're rehearsing. In whispers and bold declarations alike, they ask, what if the law is unjust and obedience becomes betrayal? From village corners to digital spaces, a political literacy is blooming, fueled not by textbooks, but by lived defiance. When the governed begin to study power more deeply than the governors, what comes next? What is unfolding in Togo is no longer a domestic crisis, is the region's final exam in democracy, not just for Lomé, but for ECOWAS, for Francophone Africa, for a generation raised between ballots and batons. This is where legality collides with legitimacy, where a people's cry for dignity meets the cold calculus of power. The streets of Lomé are not just filled with protesters, they are filled with professors of civic courage, rewriting the rules in real time. If Togo falls silent, it teaches rulers that force still triumphs. But if the people rise, it teaches nations that sovereignty begins with citizens, not palaces. This is not a story to be watched, it's a lesson to be shared. Save this video. Share it with your community. Comment your thoughts, because silence too is a choice. So, tell us, what kind of Africa do you choose to speak into being?